There is a moment, and if you have been through it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where you decide you want to build a home. And for about 5 minutes, it feels incredible. You are imagining the layout, the light coming through the windows, maybe a porch, maybe a garage workshop. It all feels possible. And then you open a browser. Suddenly, you are looking at architects, home designers, general contractors, builders, interior designers, energy consultants, HERS raters, and you realize I have no idea who I am supposed to call first or second, or what any of these people actually do in relationship to the other. That confusion is real, and it is more common than the home building industry likes to admit. The design and pre-construction phase is where the majority of costly mistakes happen. Not because homeowners are careless, but because they were never handed a real roadmap. And nowhere is that gap more invisible or more consequential than in HVAC, specifically ventilation. The V in HVAC, the piece almost nobody talks about until something goes wrong. I'm Randy Wilburn, and this is Stitt Happens, a podcast about building smarter, living better, and understanding the science behind a home that actually performs. Today, I am sitting down with David Stitt of the Stitt Group, and we are going to answer the question that most home builders never answer clearly. Where do you actually start? And what are you getting wrong before you even break ground? David, welcome back.
Good to be here. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. It's been a minute since we've had a chance to record an episode, and I'm excited to talk with you. And it's funny because we try to go through the concept and idea of each episode because we want to make sure that we're bringing the most value to our audience. And I think today's episode is probably one of the more important episodes that we're going to talk about. And I want to start off with kind of the moment. Someone's kind of decided that they want to build a custom home. Walk me through what that first week actually looks like for most people, and honestly, where it starts to go sideways.
Oh, such a great intro into this episode, and I think you captured it well. It's a moment of excitement. It's a moment of probably some sense of responsibility in a family when they're going to build something. There's generally, as most of us know in a relationship, there's someone that's probably more creative and more interested in maybe even seeing the vision of what this project could look like. And then there's someone else that's maybe more in tune with the numbers and the dollars and the process. And it's really the blending of the two that make the project successful. And people that do this well recognize this, and they find professionals that help them through it to explore the opportunities and the realities and be truth tellers, to tell people that you can have this, but it's going to cost more money, or here's a reasonable trade-off, or here's an alternative to give you what you want for less money, or help them explore. I tell people all the time, we're not here to tell them what to do. We're here to share our experience, our knowledge, and our history so that they will make better decisions. And that's really the goal. The other thing I'll really touch on just quickly, you get in your intro with the conversation about architects and planners and various people you work with. The one thing that is often missed is that energy consultant or the HERS rater and how that relates to heating and air. We have a saying, we repeat it often, if you interviewed 1,000 builders to build your home, or 1,000 architects, and you said, do you build energy efficiency into your house? What do you think they would say? Absolutely.
Yes, they would
Absolutely.
say yes.
And then you might say, well, what do you do that makes it energy efficient? I put 2 panes of glass in my windows, and we're always putting Energy Star appliances in. And the customer, not because they don't trust, but because it's generally an area of expertise that's outside most people's bandwidth, they trust and they say, okay. But talk about scratching the surface and not getting into the meat of really what makes a house efficient and comfortable is what you mentioned, HVAC. And my dad used to say, he goes, isn't it crazy that we do all this building science to keep a home somewhere between 68 and 72 degrees? That people are comfortable, not only comfortable by temperature, but by humidity and the indoor air quality, if that's done right. So that's why this is such a pinnacle topic to go through, and I'm glad we're covering it today.
Yeah, and you mentioned your dad. I'm glad you did that. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this isn't your first rodeo, meaning that your family has been involved for a couple of generations when it comes to conversations around heating, ventilation, and air condition, and more importantly, just energy efficient building. So you come by it honestly, I guess, is the simple way to put it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And one of the experiences that we also talk about here, the building that I'm in is about 2,200 feet, built in 1978. And for about 38 years, it was heated and cooled with a 1-ton air conditioner. So 1 ton for 2,200 square feet is incredibly small, and it had no utility company heat in it. We heated the building with the sun. We had a little wood stove down in the basement. But again, the building science and the understanding of how systems work, the insulation, the thermal mass, all these things that we talk about made the house comfortable. Yeah. And I'd say the house, it's an office, but it was also a demonstration home. So yes, going all the way back, we learned that if we build these buildings correctly, understanding the science, we don't need these massive heating and air systems. And there's always a little bit of a tug of war when we get into heating and air with contractors in our homes. And I say, if you're going to get you're buying a car and it's a little grocery runner or something to and from work, do you put a Mack truck engine in a little tiny car? No, you don't need it. Same with a well-built home. You don't need as much heating and air. In fact, it runs better with less.
Yeah. And just for our audience, so that they don't have to go to Dr. Google, can you just give a quick definition for HERS, HERS? Because I know when people hear that, they're like, did he say HERS like referring to a woman? And I'm not doing that. I just want to make sure that our audience understands what that is.
Love to. So HERS is a program that is a comprehensive way of evaluating the quality and performance of a home. And a HERS rating can actually be done before the home is ever built. So when we start a project and we have a plan, we'll actually run what we call a pre-HERS, pre-home energy rating system. We model the home with the glass, the type of insulation, the square footage, the orientation, even the trees, the shading, the location, and it will give us an extremely accurate report of what the energy consumption will be on that home before it's ever built. Then we do the final HERS at the end of the job, verifying that what we built and what we inspected and what we tested actually is going to perform that way in the real world. So it's the planning on the front side and the proof on the back side. And we think that's so important because it is the assurance to the customer that they got what they bargained for. Because back to our example about the builder saying I build energy efficiently by putting 2 panes of glass in a Energy Star refrigerator, that builder does not have to pay the utility bill for the next 40 years. The homeowner does. And so it's putting some credence and some teeth behind what we tell our customers they're going to get. Again, heating and air is a big part of that. Now, last thing I'll say about HERS was developed because when the federal government started to give out money for tax credits, there needed to be an organization that administered the quality of the homes to verify tax credits. And that group is called ResNet, Residential Energy Services Network. And they have a fantastic website where they have what's called an interactive HERS page where you can go in and you can understand as my home becomes more efficient and the HERS rating gets lower, meaning the lower scores are better, much like golf. But as the score gets lower, the quality and the performance of the home gets better. So you can actually go in and play and say, hey, what if I get a HERS 100? What does that mean for ownership cost? What if I get to 30? What if I get to 0? It's really interesting. So I'd encourage our listeners to go to resnet.org and they can look at the interactive HERS index.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And we'll make sure that information's in the show notes. So whatever podcast player of choice that you're listening to this on, you'll be able to check this out as well as on YouTube. So that should not be a problem. There is this assumption, David, that if you hire a good architect or a reputable builder, the process takes care of itself. Why doesn't that model hold up the way people expect it to?
We could probably have a 30-day podcast on this and all the nuances of that question, but fundamentally, the construction industry, particularly in the residential world, is very fragmented. And some of it is just the nature of consumer choice, meaning some homeowners just want a floor plan, or they just want a floor plan and floor elevations, and they are going to, maybe they know a builder, they know some subs, and they just want a general contractor themselves. There's no doubt that for the residential architect, and even residential designers, if you're not a licensed architect, to make a living, sometimes the fee structure gets a little out of hand. But when I go back to say it's fragmented, sometimes the architect or the designer is not talking to the subs every day, so they don't understand the real cost of some of these, what the trades are going to charge, and what's this building going to cost. And so the tendency before you started is, what does this look like when a family says they're going to build a home? It's exciting. And we often say at that point, you're shopping without price tags. You're imagining the front porch, the ferns hanging on the front porch with the white railing and the rocking chair, or the pool in the backyard where the kids are playing all summer. Those things are very emotional and they're very exciting. But until you put a price tag on them, it's hard to know what it's going to cost. So the design process is naturally creative, and that can sometimes start. We have a lot of sayings as we've talked. People pull more out of their head than they want to or can pull out of their back pocket, meaning that they're creatively drawing, and so the plan gets drawn, and then it goes to bid. The architect or the designer is not talking to the builder. The builder says, hey, that house is going to be a $500,000 house, and the homeowner wants to spend $250,000. And so somehow they think they can still do it, or they don't trust the budgeting process. And that's where I think a lot of times a project gets off on the wrong foot, is that people walk open houses on the weekend and they say houses cost so many dollars a foot. And then they translate that to say, if I build 3,000 square feet, that's what my house is going to cost. But that's not the case. And so floor planning and financial planning absolutely must dovetail. They have to work together. And projects that are successful have a great design, but they also have a great budget. Everyone loves talking about floor planning and no one likes to talk about financial planning. Yeah. But they have to come together, and if they do, they have successful projects. But those are two conversations that have to come very honestly and early for the project to be successul.
Yeah. I'm imagining that you have a lot of examples of how sometimes that handoff can be problematic. I think of two runners in a relay race. The first runner is the architect handing that baton off to the builder. And sometimes that builder drops the baton on the racetrack, and either they get disqualified or we know how it goes. But Do you have an example that you could share with our audience about how this can go horribly wrong? I think it's not so much to point out the ineffectiveness of an architect. We know that there are good architects and bad architects, just like there are good engineers and bad engineers, and good builders and bad builders. But just not that we want to scare our audience, but we certainly want to give them something to think about as they potentially may be embarking on this process.
Yeah. Another saying we have, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah.
And I can't give you one, but I could probably give you 10 over the years where we worked with a couple, went through a preliminary design phase to come up with a floor plan and 4 elevations, and even take elevations and stake the house on the property to come up with a budget, to present the budget, and we don't get the job. Sometime in the next 1 to 2 years, we bump into them at a home show or an open house or somewhere, and they, in many cases, will come up even a little sheepishly and say, we did build, and you know what, it didn't go very well, and we did spend what you said we would. And it's not because we're magicians or we have this crystal ball, but we systematically take the floor plan that we've drawn to scale, gather the facts, put real numbers on it, and have a conversation early about that this project that you want to build is going to cost a certain amount of money. And again, that sometimes is a hard conversation because you're either enabling or maybe even crushing some dreams. And we don't want to be that. We want to be factual and say it's better to have the conversation now and pivot and have a successful project, or make it smaller, go back into the brainstorming process. And that's where the projects get really successful. So we've got a lot of those over the years, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not because an architect or a builder's naturally deceiving the customer. That's not the point. It's just that it's a long, complex conversation, and there's a lot of moving parts. And they have to, whoever they're working with has to establish trust and make sure that the people trust their architect or builder, and vice versa. And you can have those conversations. And I will say that our process evolved years ago where we saw some of those challenges about how do we get projects that are more successful, that people can look at their banker and be comfortable that they're not going over budget, and the appraisal works and all these things. And it goes back to identifying some root problems with the process and say, why is the handoff that you described so well not always good? How do we address that? And so we start with folks right at the beginning when they have a site. We talk about the site. We talk about some preliminary drawings. We take them to customer houses that are under construction. We think about education. And through that process, we get the floor plan, the financial plan, and then align them with a good, competent custom home builder that we can all trust. We put a team together. And if we all work together, the team wins.
Yeah. You say it so simply, and that's partly because you've been doing this for a long time. And I like to think that a lot of times you have these interactions with homeowners who've actually already started down the traditional path. Maybe they've hired an architect. Maybe they've picked a builder. What are the most common things they didn't know, right? In terms of, clearly we're not all aware of everything that we should be aware of when it comes to building, but what are some of the things that you see over and over again that people just didn't know was something they should be aware of?
Wow, that's a great question. It will demand a percentage of your life. You'll make thousands of decisions, and there will come a point that we have a saying that when everything looks good, you should stop. And if everything looks bad, you should stop. So if you're making decisions and you can't make up your mind, got to walk away from it. So I think that it's just the commitment of time, money, and seeing it to the end. There's a lot of projects that get started that don't finish well. And I think you have to have that floor plan and the financial plan and someone to see you all the way to the end.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually a really good transition to this next question. The Stitt Group brings design, building science, and construction together, right? All under one roof, if you will. For someone hearing that for the first time, what does together actually mean in practice? And how does that change the day-to-day experience for a homeowner?
I like to say that everyone on the team, when we do the design and this consulting and project management piece, and we select a builder, and we've got a couple doing that, not everyone has the same skill set and the same set of strengths. And the builders that we work with have an area of expertise that they really thrive at. We find that we thrive and really bring something to the table around design, the building science, and this process of getting the home built, financial planning and all that. So we have the blind spot where some builders don't like to do the things we do and vice versa. And we're all here to serve the customer. So we all gather around a table and we have a plan. We're working through these things. Our goal is to make the job more successful and everyone to walk through this more predictably. And I think being together on that and this mutual respect and understanding of each role that we're going to play is what makes the project successful. And we literally find that there are things that we think of daily that are so critically important that have to be addressed in the building of the house. Either customers don't know or they just assume someone's going to take care of. And that's not always the case. So it's kind of looking out for each other, seeing your blind spot. And I would say that if someone has something of value, they deserve a seat at the table, but not everyone does. And so again, builders, architects, the people, or I should say we have 2 architectural designers on staff. And when we all come to the table, we all bring something of value that serves the customer better.
Yeah. I mentioned it right at the top, but I do want to talk about HVAC. And specifically, I want to talk about the V, which stands for ventilation. Most homeowners think about heating and cooling. Why does ventilation so often get left out of the conversation? And what does that cost them?
It's such an interesting topic, and probably the thing that's got the most mystery surrounding it. And I'm saying it that way because we're not here to, these aren't scare tactics. These are hopefully to empower the customer to know what to ask. But heating and air conditioning, if you looked at most of these subcontractors, they just say Bill's heat and air or whatever. But HVAC does include a component called ventilation, and that could be as simple as ventilating your bathroom or a dryer or a cooktop. But let's go back a little bit. As energy prices keep going up and the customer becomes more demanding and even more informed about the importance of good insulation that's properly installed in the right places, what we call a true weather barrier from areas that are considered to be indoors versus outdoors. As we make that envelope more and more tight, the demand within the house changes. And so specifically to heating and air, the requirements of BTU to heat the air or the requirements needed to heat the air or to provide cooling simply are less. We're just not losing it to the outside. The ventilation piece of it, let's just say 10 years ago, was not as big a problem because the house naturally leaked a lot of air. Now, sometimes the air was leaking from places that were undesirable. Maybe it's a crawl space or an attic where people didn't really know what the air, where it was coming from, so it was unhealthy. But today, as the envelope becomes more and more tight, the need for fresh air in the house is more and more important. Each occupant exhales, and even pets. And when you exhale, you're exhaling CO2, just the respiration process of living And then when you concentrate people, say in a bedroom at night, you go to bed and it's a couple people there sleeping, and maybe the dog and the cat come in, or it's maybe two children sharing a room in the house. Over time, the CO2 levels can spike in those areas, and you have to provide fresh air, exhaust the stale air out, bring fresh air in. And so many builders forever have said houses have to breathe. And there's some truth in that. They need to have fresh air in the house, but uncontrolled breathing is what we call air leakage. And air leakage is a problem because if warm, moist air is leaving or coming into the building and hitting a cool surface, now you have moisture problems. So a true air barrier between inside and out, and then proper controlled ventilation in the right doses are what the ventilation is really about.
Yeah, man, what you're explaining to me makes perfect sense. And you would think that the average person would easily understand it, but there's just so many nuances to ventilation that people don't fully get or grasp. And so when you think of the building envelope that a person has in their home and the condition of that envelope, it plays a big part in whether your home is healthy or not when it comes to being able to properly vent air and the airflow and all of that. And I've worked with a lot of engineers over the years that really get excited about that. And I know you do, because it's an important topic, and it's not the most sexy topic in the world to talk about, but it's one that anybody that is planning to build a home or wants to rehabilitate their home, it's one of the first things that they need to take a look at to make sure that they are doing things in a proper way. Because again, this is, as you said earlier, a place that you may live in for 40 plus years, and you want to make sure that you do the proper calculations to ensure that the air and the flow there inside the home is done properly.
This is I call it a study. It's a little bit anecdotal, but it's very real. And sometimes we have to help. When we work with a customer, we talk about building science. Everyone has a kind of a different area of interest. Maybe it's energy, low energy bills, maybe it's strength, because these are all things that come with building science. Universally, when we start talking about indoor air quality, we talk about better indoor air quality, filtered fresh air in your house, everyone peaks up a little bit at that. And I'll take this down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Several years ago, there was a study done, and it's not new information, but if you hit 1,000 parts per million of CO2 in a room, things start to change a little bit, meaning maybe you don't sleep as well. If they get higher, you'll get some fatigue. You may not rest. You toss and turn at night. You may wake up. You may get a headache. People don't always understand why that's happening. And again, this can potentially be a bigger problem in a house that's super airtight and not properly ventilated. So having known this, we purchased, my wife and I, and even my father, CO2 sensors. We put them around the house. We'd start to watch them. And in our homes where they're properly ventilated, we keep them below the 1,000 parts per million, which is maintaining a healthy indoor environment. But we were at a family reunion, and in that particular house, now granted there were several people in the house, but the quality of the building, the amount of moisture in the house, poorly installed heating and air system, probably no ventilation, probably limited or maybe even bad ventilation in bathrooms. We were getting ranges up in the 4,000 to 5,000 parts per million. And this was several years ago, and interestingly, people complained about headaches and not sleeping well. And we all chalk up, we're in someone else's house, and and the beds aren't as comfortable and all that. But it's amazing, and we even would manipulate this a little bit and say, let's go turn our air exchanger off for the night, and we watch the numbers spike a little bit. And we can even attribute really great nights of sleep where the CO2 parts per million are low. And so I'm going to parlay this a little bit into your question earlier, what are the things that maybe someone doesn't know to ask their builder or their architect or the professionals that they're working with? And I would say that, and I want to be clear, this is about our industry becoming more educated. It's about learning and continuing to learn and pushing this envelope because it matters. So the customer going forward to build this home says, I really think this energy efficiency thing is important, and I want low utility bills, I want a stronger home, want solar, want battery and all these. But they're most likely assuming their builder is working with a heating and air contractor that is well versed in right-sized heating and air and proper ventilation. I would say that in most cases, that's probably not the case. So people need it, they need to demand it, but they may not know what to ask.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue to the next point here, which is you mentioned that many HVAC firms don't have someone on staff who can do a proper load calculation. Can you walk me through what a load calculation actually is? I've heard that expression over the years a lot. And can maybe help us understand what happens to a homeowner's home and utility bills? Because that's the thing that most homeowners care about when it gets skipped or done wrong.
Yeah, and I'm going to generalize a little bit here. This is true of the building industry, whether it's general contractors or heating and air contractors, plumbers, electricians. It's the way the trades are. Is it maybe the father or the grandfather was in the trades, residential construction trades, and therefore the father and then maybe even the son joined it. So it's not generally an industry that someone was highly trained in a technical area of HVAC, call it an engineer, that chooses to become a contractor. So the contractors have got to now be more ready to go to more training and really learn all these nuances about high efficiency systems and HVAC. And one of those includes load calculation. So a manual J is a way of essentially building that home in a computer. What are the height of the walls, the orientation, the type of glass? How's it going to be insulated? Where's it being built? Are there trees that are shading it? All the things that are going to model that house, and it's going to come back and say, based on all this information, this is the size of the heating and air unit that's required. And it will say, this home requires a 3-ton heat pump, for example. Now, in defense of the builder, in defense of the builder and the contractor, the builder and the HVAC contractor, this modeling that may be done early on some level, the heating and air contractor has to kind of look at the builder and go, okay, I modeled it this way. I said in my plans, you're going to use this window and this insulation and all these things. Are you really going to do that? And he says, sure, I will. But then maybe he shows up to do the installation. He goes, this wasn't really that well insulated. Or they didn't use the glass that I put in my modeling. And the heating and air contractor is actually liable for the comfort of that home. So when they do a load calculation, they're doing it on the front side, hoping that the home is actually built precisely as it was modeled, which I will say is not always the case. Then there's what's called a manual D, and that's the duct design. So if you're trying to move air from the air handler to the back corner bedroom, you have to have a certain size duct with a certain amount of volume and static pressure to get the air all the way back there. So it requires that the heating and air contractor do a realistic load calculation, that then the builder coordinate with each of their subs to make sure that they do exactly what is specified so that the load calculations are real. And then ultimately it's installed properly so that it works. Now, if we can go all the way back for a second to where we started, if there's a handoff, if that baton was not properly handed off between whoever did the design work and wrote the specifications to the builder, to the heating and air contractor, to his subcontractors, there's always a chance that gets broken. And so we went back 48 years ago to the root cause of recognizing that there was a fragmentation of the industry. And if you're a sports fanatic, and a good analogy is if the head coach of a football team can't look over and say, I know my receivers and my quarterback and my line and my defensive coordinators are all working together, how's this team ever going to win? The homeowner may not know that they assume the builder is going to take care of all these details, but in many cases, because of the technical nature of these, they look at the heating and air contractor and say, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and he just does it. But there's no assurance that it was done correctly.
Yeah. But as I'm listening to this and wondering, and I'm sure somebody watching this may be wondering the same question, man, all of this sounds amazing, David. I wish I met you back, insert the years ago when my house was being built. Now I have this home. Is there still a way to correct some of those deficiencies that may come up if a load calculation wasn't properly done or done at all in a home that I currently live in right now, right? And I'm thinking about those that might be looking at, maybe they're not going to build a new house right now because you work with people that have existing homes too. I think it's important maybe to say that there's still hope, or there's a possibility there for you to correct the situation.
Yeah, it's been several years, but quite a few years ago, it was estimated there were 130 million homes in America that were in need of an energy retrofit. And that was at a conference called Greenbuild Chicago. I don't know, it was probably in 2010, or I don't know what year it was exactly, but it was several years ago. And yes, there is. And the thing I always tell people on that is that it's apparent there's a problem usually for two reasons. One, people are uncomfortable, meaning it's just too hot or cold in the house. Maybe they have a high utility bill. That could be another indication. The other one is high moisture. We've literally had people that called us that did not work with us, and they say, I'm trying to find a solution here. The newspaper on my kitchen table sometimes is so moist, it tears when we pick it up. The relative humidity inside the house is so high, there's latent moisture sitting there, yet it's cool. And that's indicative of a system that's short cycling. It's hitting temperature real quick, but not addressing humidity. So I have this way I like to say that if I was going to the doctor, and this relates to fixing broken homes, and I had a headache, and I just walked into the doctor, he goes, all right, let's go to the hospital. I'm going to do brain surgery on you. I'd be like, wait, how do you know I need brain surgery? He said, you have a headache. I'm like, yeah, but I bumped my head on the car coming in. I'm actually coming because my ankle hurts. That is diagnosis without really trying to understand the problem. And so there's, back to HERS raters, there are HERS raters that will gather the facts. They will go into your home and they will methodically test. They'll look for air infiltration. They'll look for system size. Where's the problems? And then based on science, they will come back and say, here's the problem with your home. And a little bit of a knock on the window industry spent probably hundreds of $millions of marketing telling every customer that if your house is uncomfortable, you need to replace all your windows. And that may be the case, but most generally, it's a thermal bypass, meaning there's air passing around through the house, making the upstairs bonus room hot. And it could be as simple as a piece of cardboard, some insulation, and spray foam. For $50, you can solve the problem instead of $50,000. So hiring a really good ResNet certified home energy rater to test the house, quantify the problem, and then recommend the solution, and then you go and get competitive bids to fixing it. That way, the results are actually they're actionable. They're going to yield fruit, so to speak. They're going to work.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of talked about HERS twice now, and we were able to discuss load calculations. So I want to think about someone that might be listening to this and they're about 6 months away from wanting to break ground. What is the single most important thing they should do differently because of this conversation?
Well, obviously, I'm biased, and I think working with good qualified professionals is the number one thing. People that check their references, go to their projects, whether that be an architect, a residential designer, a builder. Do your due diligence. You've got to know who you're working with because the implications of a bad decision are pretty high. Faltering, and this is a huge decision that people are making. I go back to the root causes of problems in our industry, and we do believe that where there are problems are also opportunities. And our opportunity that we saw was, let's be an integrated professional organization that starts with the preliminary drawings and financial planning and help them walk through the building science and then bring the necessary people into the fold or into the project when they're needed. And we don't do cabinets, but we can sure recommend a great cabinet shop that can help do that. So the integration, trying to break down the silos of building a house and get everyone talking is probably the most important thing. And naturally, that's just what we do. I hear from people all the time. They say, you guys are a one-stop shop. You're doing my design, you're doing my financial planning, you're doing my building science, you're doing my testing, which I also think of as quality assurance or consumer protection, that you're actually receiving what you paid for, and then a closeout at the end of the job. And customer satisfaction is paramount. This is no joke. We receive every year the utility bills from a guy that we did a house for in about early 80s. I don't know the exact year. And I got it the other day. His name's John, and he sent me his utility bills, 2,400 foot house, and it's about $50. That goes back to the early 80s. So when customers are satisfied in the process work, they love sending your utility bills or coming to an open house. And so my answer to your question is, go to our website, check us out. And we're not for everyone, but if we can't help you, we'll guide you in the direction that hopefully you can have a successful project with someone else other than us.
And you didn't say this, but I would venture to say that if I was a guessing person, I would say that because you guys are a multi-generational business, meaning you've been around for a while now, both your dad and now you've probably answered and helped a lot of people that were never even clients, just by sharing basic anecdotal information or just some helpful tip here or there that helped guide that person in a direction that they needed to go, or maybe just an encouraging word about, hey, you're on the right path, try this and you should be okay. Because again, it's unfortunate. You'd love to serve everybody, but I think sometimes it's difficult for any business to fully acknowledge that they can't be all things to all people, but they can take time to provide quality information and guidance that doesn't necessarily result in a transaction or a sale. Yep. And I think that speaks volumes. It's one of the reasons why you did this podcast in the first place, because I remember when you originally came to me, you said, I just want to provide some helpful information for somebody out there that might be struggling with the idea of what an energy efficient home really is. And what I've appreciated about doing this project is each episode is built on the other. There's never been a sales pitch in here. And I'm just saying that because I appreciate that. It is refreshing in a day and age when you're constantly being sold something literally every 8 seconds, David. And so I think it's important for people to realize that there are still businesses out there like the Stitt Group and Stitt Solar that legitimately want to provide information to the consumer so they can make the best decision possible.
I appreciate you saying that. We've written a book. My father wrote a book, 18 Principles to Building an Energy Efficient Home. And the purpose of that was to put it out there and say, the whole world, the consumers, everyone doing a project are better off if they followed some of those principles. So we have our own spin on how to do it. And to piggyback your gracious comments there, I would also say this. We learned decades ago that for us to simply survive, we had to fulfill our mission of providing a better product. But we also had to do it in such a way that the customer could get a mortgage on it or get an appraisal. It had to be economical. So a lot of these things that we talk about, they don't only work, but they're economical and be integrated into a house. And I think that's one of the things that we try to do for our customers, is to help dispel that myth that all this energy stuff is so expensive, no one can afford it. We've won awards for low income energy value housing over the years, going back some time, but there is a better way to do it. And I was on a podcast yesterday, or a webinar yesterday, about challenges to our industry. And the biggest challenge to the construction industry now is competency among people, meaning it's hard to find good people. And when we find people, they've got a lot to learn. And it's not me and our design staff. It's not our solar folks. It's the plumber. It's the heating and air guy. It's the people doing the accounting. Everyone has to up their game and keep learning more, because we're being infused with new technology, new opportunities. And I think one of the things in this, there's been a theme, is what do you look for? I think you have to be looking for, if you're going to build a home, you have to look for people that are figuring out how to make it stronger, how to make it safer, healthier, more resilient, lower energy. They have to be forward thinking. They have to be looking at the next thing on the radar, figure out how to implement it. If the builder just wants to do it the way he's always done it, or the plumber or the heat and air guy, they're probably not a good fit. And I think that's inspiring and that's exciting. And if you have that outlook on things, what a great and fun thing to do, to build a home that's on the cutting edge. It's affordable, and in most cases will save you money, and you live a better life.
Yeah. This is my last question before we land this plane. And this is obviously a little bit bigger. Everything that we talked about, what does it look like for Arkansas and the broader region when more homes are built this way? What changes?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Besides hopefully lower utility bills.
Yeah, I think financial savings, the energy costs are going to keep going up, so saving money. I think health. I think if we're an energy company, but I think living in a healthy home, getting a better night rest, waking up refreshed, eating better, not that that's an energy thing, but generally people that are interested in better indoor air quality and healthier place to live, and a stronger, safer place. It simply sounds almost cliche, but to live a better life. I think that the quality of life for people that live in a great home, and I have to stress, what we do and the quality of the structure does not drive cost. Custom countertops and swimming pools and steel wrought iron fences and 5-car garages are what drive cost. We can do our process on small starter homes just as well. So I think the answer to your question is hopefully more disposable income, better quality of life, and happier families.
Yeah. Matt, you nailed it. That's perfect. David Stitt, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. This was another one for the books, for sure. We're thankful for the work that you guys do at the Stitt Group and Stitt Solar, and we really appreciate it.
Great doing these. I love them. Look forward to everyone we do, and appreciate your hosting this and creating a good dialogue.
Absolutely. Folks, if you walked away from this episode with one thing, I hope it is this. The confusion you feel at the start of a home building project is not a you problem. It is a system problem. And the good news is there are people out there like David and the team at the Stitt Group who have built their entire practice around solving it. Design, building, science, construction, ventilation, project management, a verified HERS rating at the end to prove it all worked. That is not a collection of services. That is a philosophy about how homes should be built and how families should live in them. The V in HVAC stands for ventilation, and now you know to ask about it. If you are thinking about building a custom home in Arkansas or anywhere, do yourself a favor and have this conversation before you hire anyone. The questions you ask up front are the ones that save you money, time, and stress down the road. You can learn more about the Stitt Group at thestittgroup.com. And if this episode helped you think differently about your home building journey, share it with someone who's in the planning phase. This is exactly the kind of conversation they need to hear. I'm Randy Wilburn, and this is Stitt Happens. We will see you next time.